Ganesh, 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 Ganesha. Ganesh, 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 Ganesha. Even Ganesha has to clear his throat. Ganesh, 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 Ganesha. Ganesh, 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 Ganesha. That's 24 repetitions of the name Ganesha. If I do three more of those, and then a half of one, that's 108. I think I'll just go ahead and do it. I'll start from the beginning, because it's Happy Ganesh Chaturthi. Ganesh, 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 Ganesha, Ganesh, 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 Ganesha, Ganesh, 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 Ganesha, Ganesh, 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 Ganesha, Ganesh, 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 Ganesha, Ganesh, 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 Ganesha, Ganesh, 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 Ganesha, Ganesh, 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 Ganesha, Ganesh, 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 Ganesha, Ganesh, 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 Ganesha, Ganesh, 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 Ganesha, Ganesh, 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 Ganesha, Ganesh, 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 Ganesha, Ganesh, 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 Ganesha, Ganesh, 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 Ganesha, Ganesh, 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 Ganesha, Ganesh, 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 Ganesha, Ganesh, 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 Ganesha. That's 108. Why did I do that? Why do you do anything? Number one, because it's fun. And number two, I think it pleases my Lord Ganesha. Anyway, if you're still with me, we're going to do part 3, or most of part 3, but we're finishing up on knowing Aleister Crowley personally. It was an essay by Grady L. McMurtry, or Caliph Hymenaeus Alpha 777, way back in 1979. And if you've been listening to the first couple little installments here, you know that Grady digresses a lot, as he always did, even in personal conversation. He digresses a lot into World War II stories. Not just because that's what veterans like to do, but also because there's magical significance in most of what he's saying, at least within the context of what he's trying to communicate. Today, today's installment, the final installment, is the last and longest, and I would have to say a good 2/3 of it are kind of minute details concerning how to defuse a 500-pound bomb. I'm going to gloss over much of that because I want to actually bring up his memories of Aleister Crowley and his adventures in meeting Crowley in wartime London, excuse me, wartime England, because he met him or he visited him in three places: in London, 93 Jermyn Street, and then at the Bell Inn in Ashton, Clinton, and then finally in Hastings. So here we go. As I said in my last rap, I would see Crowley one more time at Bell Inn, Ashton, Clinton. At the time, it seemed all very accidental. Looking back, it seemed all very karmic. But anyway, what happened was that, having survived the invasion of Normandy and the Battle of Northern France, we were up in Belgium, preparing for the assault on the Rhine. This was where the incident of the 80 500-pounders occurred. One day I read in the Stars and Stripes, our army newspaper, that they were offering a course in explosive ordnances in England to any ammunition supply officer who didn't know his ass from his elbow. Since I had gone to quartermaster officer candidate school, I had never seen Aberdeen proving ground. Now that's in England. And remember, he's in Belgium. Two things hit me at once. One, it would be interesting to find out something about what I was doing. And two, Crowley was in England. It was a long chance, but there was always just that possibility. So I find myself piling into a British plane up in Brussels airport, so antique that it only had two pilots, but only room for 4 passengers. We started taking off down the runway under the usual cloud cover. As I thought at the time, it's always raining in northern France and Belgium. Stupid me. How was I to know that this was the fog blanket into which Glenn Miller would disappear, flying east to France at the same time, and under which von Rundstedt would launch the Ardennes offensive, otherwise known as the Battle of the Bulge. Things like that I would find out later. At the time, what I noticed was that neither pilot was looking down the runway in front of us, as pilots normally do at takeoff. But that the one on the left was looking to the left and the one on the right was looking to the right. This did seem unusual, so I did the same. That's when I grabbed my seat and hung on for dear life. This twin-engine crate was so ancient that the tachometers were on the engine nacelles. And what the two pilots were doing was trying to keep the two engines turning at the same speed so that we wouldn't ground loop and wind up in a fiery pile of junk. But we finally lifted off, cleared the cloud cover, and started pocketing along toward England at about 60 miles an hour, maybe 6,000 feet off the ground, under a brilliant sun and looking down on a pure, unbroken carpet of white that went on, and me twisting my head around to see if some stray ME-109s would come rolling in for a little target practice like that day in Normandy. But then I had been on the ground and could duck. A little hard to duck at 6,000 feet and on. At 60 miles an hour, it takes a while to fly from Brussels to London. Finally, there was the blue of the English Channel and the white cliffs, and we landed at Croydon. And by truck and bus and trolley and train up to Leicester. Okay, that's how he got from Belgium after the D-Day invasion back to England on the off chance he could see Crowley again. Then this is the part where all the minute details of disarming a bomb. This was all very interesting and fun in its own kind of way, but terribly academic until the world exploded. I came down to breakfast one morning to find the Stars and Stripes on my table. Headlines all over the place. And May full of spearheads supposedly depicting German armored divisions, all pointing directly at where I left my ordnance supply and maintenance company at Bruglet, about 30 miles south of Brussels. What to do? Well, school's over. Back to London, back to the continent, back to the war. Only to have the desk sergeant tell me, "Lieutenant, we can't even drop paratroopers into the Bastion. How the hell are we going to fly you back to the continent?" So my hunch paid off. But first things first. Grab one of those funny spare London taxis with the open front end that can turn on a dime, and score a bottle of black market scotch for an exorbitant price. Then scrounge up a couple cigars from some place and off to Bell Inn, Ashton, Clinton. That may have been where I met Kenneth Grant, because I definitely remember meeting him at Bell Inn. We rapped about many things, but the only thing he said that really stuck in my mind was his last sentence, which was, "You really must come back for Christmas. It's going to be the traditional English Christmas dinner, complete with flaming plum pudding." After all, the Bell Inn is a traditional English country inn. And so, back to London and check in with air transport. And no, Lieutenant, all flights are canceled for today. But be sure to be here at 8 o'clock in the morning. So in other words, he had until 8 o'clock that morning to get himself to the Bell Inn Christmas dinner and back to London. It was about this time I met those Canadian girls and got introduced to the British officer. I jumped the gun there. It was about this time I met those Canadian girls and got introduced to the British Officer Club circuit, which is quite different from the regular street pub. And a few days of living it up goes by. Then it's Christmas. And time to visit Crowley up to Ashton, Clinton. But behold, enter the villain, the British railway drivers. We call the guys who manage the throttles on railroad engineers here in the States. I had it up to the ears and decided to pull. The railroad engineers had it up to the ears and decided to pull a one-day strike. They were not being unpatriotic, but you must understand that they'd been fighting the war since Hitler had invaded Poland, and the British were a tired people. So the railway employees just told the government flat, for one bloody night, Gov, in all these years of this bloody war, we're going to have Christmas dinner with our families at home. Personally, I approve, but damn sure left me up a bloody creek, because how was I to get back to London by 8 o'clock the next morning? On the other hand, who could miss having Christmas dinner with Aleister Crowley? So I said, to hell with it, I'm going. After all, I've been risking my life on a daily basis ever since Normandy. Why should I worry about a reprimand? So by taxi up to Paddington Station, that great gloomy sooty cathedral to Victorian bad taste where you take trains going north, and off at Ashton Clinton Station. Everything looked normal, gates open, lights on, looked cheerful enough. Even serving that awful slop they called tea in British railway stations in wartime England. That's why they filled the glass half full with watered milk so you could gag down the stuff. At least it was hot and warmed your tummy on a cold night. Maybe everything would be all right. So off cheerfully to the Bell Inn and Crowley. And we toasted the Yuletide with brandy, and it was time to go down to dinner, and all those suet things that only a Saxon stomach can take. And sure enough, the flaming plum pudding. Then back upstairs for more talk and brandy and the cigars, and a wonderful time, and around midnight it was time to say goodbye. And I walked back down to the station in the fog that had come up. It looked like a tomb, lights out, gates locked, not a person in sight. What the hell am I going to do? Ah, brilliant inspiration. What is the one place in town that's going to be open all night? The police station, of course. Not hard to find. It was the only house in town that had its lights on. So I walked in and explained my problem to the desk sergeant. He was sympathetic, but said, not a chance. With the heavy ground fog, not even the lorries are running. English country winters are subject to what we'd call Yule fog, and a lorry is what they call a truck. Then he brightened and said, but there's a bobby on a wheel, a motorcycle, coming through in a few minutes, going down to the next town toward London. Maybe you can hop a ride with him. So I find myself on the back end of a motorbike, blasting along through the fog, freezing my end off, down to the next station, and again to the next station. What happened after that is a blur. All I remember for sure is waking up, standing in the open end, in the back end of a milk truck, running into the outskirts of London in a cloudy dawn, trying to find some place where I can catch a tram. I made it to the air transport office at just exactly 8 o'clock a.m., only to be told, sorry, Lieutenant, all flights are canceled for today. Be sure to be here at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. It's really remarkable what some people would go through just to have lunch with Aleister Crowley. But personally, I wouldn't have missed it for anything. And that's my little sharing of a memoir by Grady L. McMurtry, Caliph Hymenaeus Alpha, 777, who gave me my Minerval initiation on November 15th, 1975, and subsequently my first, second, third, and fourth, and then he died. Anyway, until tomorrow, continue to be good to yourself and be good to each other. And enjoy your Ganesha Chaturthi. It's Ganesha's birthday. Be good to yourself and be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love under will.